They say emotions make us human, right? You've probably heard it a million times. Listen to your heart, don't bottle it up, express what you feel. But Niccolò Machiavelli, he didn't buy into any of that, because he saw a harsh reality that most people never do. The more you let yourself feel, the more others control you. Emotions, they make you predictable. They show your hand. Left unchecked, your sensitivity is like a leash around your neck anyone can yank it. You love someone openly, they exploit that. You care too much, and they test your limits. Fear shows on your face, and they use it against you. React too quickly, and they win the battle before you even realize it. Machiavelli wasn't just about mastering politics. He mastered himself, because here's the truth. No matter how solid your strategy is, it falls apart if your emotions get hijacked at the wrong moment. From the moment you're born, you're taught that being open means honest. Feeling equals truth. Vulnerability means strength. And yet, every time you got emotional, someone used that to their advantage. You forgave too soon. You overreacted and seemed unstable. You chased closure that never came. You shared something personal, and they kept it stored away to use when needed. That's the cost. Your feelings didn't set you free, they handed someone else the keys to your cage. Machiavelli didn't live in some modern therapy world filled with oversharing and constant emotional checks. He lived in courts filled with betrayal, bribery, blood. He saw friends turn into enemies, allies betray each other, kings fall because they trusted the wrong smile. In that world, emotional reactions could get you killed. You couldn't afford even a hint of it. People, especially men in power, are driven by two main forces, love and fear. Machiavelli knew that to be feared, you have to feel less. If you're emotional, you're predictable. Your anger is easy to stir up. Your silence tells a story. Your love can be weaponized against you. When you're reactive, you lose because you respond before thinking, speak before measuring, act before observing. You become dependent on feeling, validation, approval. You hand others the power to shape how you see yourself, making it that much easier to disarm you. People don't even have to outsmart you. They just trigger you. They push your buttons and watch you crumble. If you look back through history, the most dangerous people all share one trait. They're unbothered by gossip, unmoved by affection, and unapologetically immune to what others think about them. But that doesn't mean they're cold or robotic. They're self-contained. That was the goal for Machiavelli, not to become a machine or a monster, but a man who couldn't be moved from the outside in. Because once you stop reacting emotionally, you start acting strategically. You become someone others watch carefully because they can't read you. You say less, you listen more. You observe everything but never show it on your face. And that kind of control, it scares people who live in an emotional world. Now, you might say, isn't that just being numb? No. There's a big difference between suppressing emotions and controlling them. Suppression means avoiding your feelings altogether. Control means precision. You don't pretend you don't feel. You decide when, how, and why to express your emotions. That if the moment isn't strategic, you might feel something inside, but you don't show it. That's what separates the thinkers from the reactors, the winners from the victims. Machiavelli didn't want to be numb. He wanted to be untouchable. So he trained mentally, physically, in his posture, in his silence. Because once you learn to feel nothing on command, you don't just gain power, you become power. But Machiavelli wasn't born like that. His detachment was forged by humiliation, betrayal, exile, by being used and then forgotten by those who once shook his hand with a smile. His transformation wasn't about philosophy, it was about survival. You don't become unshakable from reading a book, you become unshakable when feeling everything nearly destroys you. Machiavelli served the Florentine Republic, rising through the ranks, negotiating with kings, popes, tyrants. He gave loyalty to people he believed worthy, and they threw him out, imprisoned him, tortured him, erased his entire political life in days, not because he failed, but because power shifted and loyalty no longer meant anything. That was the first lesson. People love you only until you become inconvenient. What do most people do then? Cry, collapse, beg to keep their job, apologize, seek forgiveness. Not Machiavelli. He watched, he learned, he detached. He realized that emotions make you loyal to people who would sell you the moment it suits them. So he made a decision. If I'm going to suffer, it won't be because of love, it will be for strategy. Every betrayal starts with one phrase: I thought they wouldn't. I thought they wouldn't lie, wouldn't leave, wouldn't betray me. That thought comes from trust, and trust comes from emotion. But Machiavelli saw the cold truth. People are loyal only until loyalty costs them too much. And when the price gets too high, they flip. Emotion doesn't stop betrayal. It blinds you to the warning signs, and he refused to be blind again. The turning point in his transformation wasn't rage, it was clarity. He wrote The Prince not to get revenge, but to share what he learned unflinchingly. He didn't whine about how unfair life was. He documented how power actually worked, how most people aren't strong enough to admit it. You probably think you're emotionally intelligent because you feel things deeply. But true intelligence means feeling deeply and still acting with cold, clear strategy, and Machiavelli trained for that. So how do you actually get from being emotionally reactive to emotionally unshakable? It doesn't start with some inspirational quotes or quick fixes. It starts with looking back at your own pain. Think about your past: who used you, who lied, who vanished the moment you weren't useful anymore. What did you feel in those moments? Shame, grief, anger, confusion. That pain isn't just trauma, it's data. It's your training ground. Every betrayal sends a message. Stop letting people see what they don't deserve to hold. Every disappointment is a reminder. Your expectations are like emotional hostages. Machiavelli didn't numb himself to survive. No, he studied his pain until it stopped controlling him. He broke down human behavior. He rewired his instincts. He turned heartbreak into pattern recognition. Now, when someone smiles a little too fast, or praises you too quickly, or agrees too eagerly, he doesn't feel warmth, he feels caution. See, immunity isn't built by hiding. It's built by facing exposure head-on. Machiavelli didn't isolate himself. He stayed close to power, corruption, and deceit. But instead of absorbing all that emotionally, he treated it like a surgical observation. He trained his mind to watch, not react, to record, not collapse, to stay still while others spilled their emotions. Over time, emotions stopped driving his decisions. They became signals, intel data to be studied, not a steering wheel. That's what you're building now, not apathy, but emotional sovereignty. The ability to feel without being owned by those feelings. Machiavelli didn't escape emotion to find peace, he mastered it for power. Because once you control your emotions, you automatically control others. Why? Because everyone else is controlled by the very feelings you've now neutralized. They want to be liked. They need to feel understood. They react when triggered. They speak nervously. They confess when scared. You don't do any of that. You become still. And in that stillness, you become the authority. Think about group dynamics. Who speaks first? Usually someone trying to impress. Who interrupts? Someone afraid of being forgotten. The one who explains too much, unsure if they'll be understood. The one who desperately needs to be heard. They're already losing. Now watch the one who waits. They don't react. They don't rush. They don't over-explain. But when they finally speak, everyone listens. Not because they speak loudly, but because their words carry weight. That's Machiavellian presence. He who controls himself controls others, because your calm becomes their emotional mirror. If you stay steady, they start doubting their tone. If you don't flinch, they wonder if they've crossed the line. If you don't chase closure, they spiral, trying to figure out why. The more detached you become, the more power others accidentally hand you. Here's what Machiavelli understood. When you speak less, people panic in the silence. To break that tension, they start talking, they confess, they justify, they reveal things you never asked for, because silence feels like judgment. Power, it feels like you know something they don't. So instead of trying to read them, you let them read themselves out loud. And the best part, you never gave anything away. That most people expect cause and effect. They insult you, you react. They guilt trip you, apologize. They beg you, soften. They ghost you, chase. That's emotional people playing on visible triggers. But when you stop reacting, you become a pattern breaker. Now they don't know what you're thinking, what you'll do, how you feel, or when you'll move. You've introduced uncertainty, and uncertainty breaks control. You're no longer playing the game. You controlled the board. Let's be clear, detachment isn't apathy. You still care. You still want things. You still feel. You've just removed the external access to those feelings. People no longer get to predict your next move, read your face, sense your weakness, time you, or manipulate you. Now, only you know what's happening inside. Everyone else is guessing, and guesswork always breeds fear, because the person they can't read is the person they assume is more powerful than they are. Ever notice how the quietest person in the room is usually the one no one dares to cross? That's not just charisma, it's emotional control expressed physically. When you speak slowly, react sparingly, move with purpose, hold eye contact without tension, sit still while others squirm you, broadcast dominance without saying a word. You're not trying to impress, you're not trying to prove yourself. You're simply anchored while others drift, desperate to ground themselves in your presence. And the more they drift, the more they orbit you. Machiavelli didn't meditate on a mountaintop. He trained in courts, in conversations, in conflicts, because emotional control isn't built in peace, it's built in war. You don't learn to stay calm when you're alone. You learn it when you're challenged, tested, provoked, and you still choose silence. That's where detachment becomes a discipline, not a mood, a personality trait, or a phase, but a method. Someone insults you. Pause. They guilt trip you. Pause. They beg, cry, accuse, manipulate. Pause. Machiavelli trained the pause like a weapon, because in that space between stimulus and response, you regain control not just over your words, but over the room. You become the one setting the tempo, and once you own the tempo, you own the direction. He who speaks second has the advantage of seeing the whole field. That's not just strategy, it's emotional economy. Let them spend energy. You keep yours. That alone makes you more powerful. You don't react to every tone shift. You don't internalize every insult. You don't collapse at every sign of rejection. You watch. You catalog. You study. Not to attack, but to understand. Because most people show their entire psychological blueprint in the way they try to make you feel. If they guilt trip you, they're insecure. If they flatter you, they want control. If they ignore you, they want attention. Machiavelli treated emotions like information. Every reaction, a map to someone's deepest fears. And every map is an advantage if you stay quiet long enough to read it. You don't owe anyone your emotional clarity. If someone says, "You seem off, are you okay?" you say, "I'm processing." If they ask, "What are you thinking right now?" you say, "A lot, but nothing urgent." That's how you train your ambiguity muscle. Not fake it, but say less than they can use. Because clarity creates emotional vulnerability. Ambiguity creates protection. The less they know about what affects you, the more they guess. And the more they guess, the less power they have. When a conversation stops being productive, you leave it. Not with drama, explanation, or apology, but with distance. You stop replying. You stop engaging. You stop validating. Why? Because every unnecessary response is a withdrawal from your emotional bank. Machiavelli never let anyone keep him trapped in a loop. He disengaged silently. Power doesn't need a closing statement, it just needs to vanish. You're sitting in an awkward silence. Everyone's eyes on you, and you feel misunderstood. Your first instinct, to fix it, fill the silence, explain yourself, defend your intentions. But he would feel that same pressure and just sit there, still, unmoved, unbothered. Because real training happens in those moments when you refuse to relieve discomfort. Discomfort is a test, and most people fail by rushing to fix it. You win by letting others drown in tension. You've already learned to breathe inside that silence. Eventually, you won't need to pause anymore. It'll be natural. You won't have to fake neutrality. You'll live it. You won't get triggered because others simply can't reach you. That's when you go from discipline to dominance. You train yourself to feel nothing when it matters most, then everything only when it serves you. You're not cold, you're precise. In a world addicted to overreaction, that kind of precision is the highest form of power. Machiavelli's methods weren't made for peaceful temples. They were forged in courts, councils, betrayals, and your modern world. It's no different. You're not just tested in private anymore. You're tested publicly every day. Think about social media messages designed to provoke instant emotional reactions, relationships weaponizing guilt, silence, and drama, workplaces built not on skill but on emotional games. In all that chaos, emotional stillness becomes your shield, your sword, your signal. So, how do you apply this power? Precisely, and without apology. In person, online, everywhere, that someone says something designed to trigger you. They want to see you defensive, angry, emotionally leaking. That response hands them control. What would Machiavelli do? Nothing. He'd look, wait, let the silence grow. And that silence, it's louder than a scream. If a response is needed at all, something like, interesting point. If that's how you see it, I'll think about that. You give them no fight, no admission, no weakness. They walk away confused because you didn't play the role they expected. Whether it's a partner, a family member, or a friend, emotionally, reactive people need proof they've affected you. When you raise your voice, cry, beg, or explain, they feel important. They feel in control. They feel like they've won. Machiavelli, he stays completely composed. He doesn't beg to be understood, match energy, or say, you're overreacting. He says, we'll revisit this when emotions have cooled. I understand. You need space. Let's not destroy respect to prove a point. This isn't detachment. It's emotional martial arts. You deflect their attacks. You preserve your center. You win without conflict. Someone takes a shot at you online. They bait you in comments, messages, indirect posts. The world teaches us to clap back, defend our name, clear things up. Not Machiavelli. He who speaks first looks defensive. He who speaks last looks decisive. He who says nothing, untouchable. Them rant, let others watch. Your silence is a roar. To some you're dignified, to others mysterious, to your enemies, terrifying. You didn't defend yourself. You made them look obsessed. That's power. You'll meet people who confuse love with control. They'll say things like, if you don't tell me right now, it means you don't care. Why won't you just be vulnerable? You used to share everything with me. Translation, I can't control you anymore, and that scares me. Machiavelli wouldn't feel the need to explain his silence because his love, like his strategy, was deliberate, not reactive. He wouldn't respond to pressure. He'd respond to pattern. If someone constantly uses emotional leverage against you, you don't owe them openness. You owe them distance. Emotional stillness teaches others how to treat you not with words, but with resistance. You don't react, you reposition, and people who can't respect that, they're not qualified to stay. Your name gets mentioned in rooms you're not even in. You're being framed, doubted, redefined. You want to defend yourself, to say, that's not who I am. But Machiavelli, he wouldn't fight lies. He'd flood them with results. He'd outperform, outlast, outgrow. Because when you engage rumors, you validate them. When you ignore them, man rise anyway you turn. Critics into footnotes, and history never remembers the footnotes. Over time, you'll notice people stop pushing your buttons because they no longer work on you. Drama avoids you because it can't get energy from you. Your influence grows not because you demanded it, but because people feel safer around someone they can't control. You become the one who knows when to speak, how to pause, how to command through calmness, how to rule without raising your voice. And in today's world, that makes you dangerous in the quietest way possible. Now, let's set the record straight on a huge misconception. You're not becoming heartless, you're becoming whole. Machiavelli didn't train himself to feel less. He trained to feel on his own terms. His goal wasn't emotional numbness. It was emotional sovereignty, the power to own every feeling without being owned by any of them. And that right there is where detachment turns into a superpower. Most people confuse stillness with repression. They think if you're not showing rage, you're bottling it up. If you're not crying, you're hiding your pain. If you don't explain yourself, you're emotionally unavailable. But Machiavelli would say the strongest feelings are the ones that don't need an audience. True power is when you feel anger but don't lash out. You feel sadness but still speak clearly. You feel pressure but still move with precision. That's not apathy, that's mastery. You've probably been taught that emotional intelligence means naming your emotions, sharing how you feel, and understanding others' emotions. That's great for fitting in, but if you want to lead, command, and outlast, emotional intelligence flips the script. It becomes about not leaking under pressure, not reacting to manipulation, reading others without letting them read you. It's no longer about expressing feelings, it's about managing their visibility strategically. In Machiavelli's world, uncontrolled emotional visibility was dangerous. Empathy, not weakness, but uncontrolled empathy. That's a trap. Reactive empathy is when you feel bad and immediately rush to fix things. You mirror someone's pain without questioning their intent. You say, I understand, even when they're attacking you. Strategic empathy though, means understanding someone's emotional state and using that information wisely, not absorbing it blindly. You listen, you care, but you never let their emotions determine your actions. That's the skill Machiavelli mastered, using emotions as intel, not instructions. Let's face it, life is noisy, people are impulsive, the world is hooked on emotional reactions. So how does Machiavelli respond? With distance, not because he's cold, but because chaos doesn't deserve his warmth. When someone is yelling, guilt-tripping, performing for attention, or acting out emotionally, you don't fix it. You don't argue or debate, you pull away. That's not giving up. That's protecting your signal. You don't let emotional static distort your frequency. Machiavelli didn't believe in pure detachment, just for detachment's sake. He believed in detachment that filters what's real. Because when you're reactive, you love the people who confuse you, chase the ones who ghost you, serve the ones who exploit your kindness. But when you become still, you don't chase, you observe. You don't prove your weight, you don't beg, you listen. And most people fail those tests because they were never meant to be beside your stillness. They were only loud enough to be noticed in your chaos. The moment you stop feeling everything for everyone is when you start seeing everyone for who they really are. That's when detachment turns into vision. You don't reach emotional immunity with fireworks, you arrive quietly, in silence. And one day you'll realize, this would have shattered me before, but now I feel only what I choose to feel. That's when you know you're not just surviving emotional chaos, you're governing it. Machiavelli wouldn't celebrate emotional detachment as a trophy. He'd see it as a milestone, a mark of readiness. And when you reach that state, the world will start reacting differently to you, even if they can't explain why. You won't feel the need to justify your silence, your boundaries, or your absence. You won't find yourself dropping disclaimers like, I'm not ignoring you, I just need space, or I'm not being rude, I'm just tired, or sorry if I seemed cold. Because emotional immunity means knowing, if someone needs you to explain your peace, they were never going to respect it anyway. You move quietly, and those meant to stay in your world won't question why. People who once tried to control you with emotional pressure, the ones who said things like, after everything I've done for you, I thought you cared, or you used to be different there. Lines fall flat, not because you've become cruel, but because you finally see what they're doing. They're not expressing pain, they're fishing for control. And now, you don't bite, you nod, you breathe, you walk away. That's not indifference, that's recognition. You see the game, and you choose not to play. You no longer rush to fill silence. You don't over-explain to avoid being misunderstood. You speak in clean, weighted lines, and that's enough. Why? Because emotional immunity sharpens your language. You say things like, I understand, that's not something I tolerate. Let's revisit this later. People listen because your words carry gravity, not performance. You're not talking to be validated anymore. You only speak when it matters. And that scarcity makes people pay attention. Before, it might have taken months to spot red flags. Now, one conversation, one boundary test, one guilt trip, and you see exactly what it is. Emotional clarity lifts the illusion. You no longer project hope onto people or invent excuses for them. You don't interpret chaos as potential. You just see. And when you see, you act. You don't need 10 proofs. One is enough. Situations that used to unravel, you now feel like rehearsed theater. The guilt trip, you've seen that act before. The emotional explosion, you already know the script. The passive-aggressive comment, you don't even turn your head. Machiavelli trained himself for courtrooms, full of false smiles and veiled threats. You've trained yourself for the emotional equivalent. Now, you don't react, you redirect. You've transformed from target to threat, from reactive to ruler, from emotional to elemental. Most people can feel it, even if they can't name it. There comes a moment when you don't have to fake it anymore. You don't have to practice detachment. You don't have to hesitate before responding. You simply are unpebble, unshaken, unreadable, not because you feel nothing, but because you've trained yourself to feel only what serves you. That's the final form. If Machiavelli were alive today, this is exactly how he'd walk the earth. You're no longer the emotional soldier, fighting battles, chasing apologies, proving your worth. You've become the strategist, the one who listens without reacting, moves without warning, vanishes without drama, leads without raising your voice. You don't ask, what should I say? You ask, what outcome do I want? Then you choose stillness, silence, or strike. Not emotionally, strategically, because emotional people are easy to consume. They confess too soon, apologize too fast, bleed just to be seen, burn out keeping others warm. But once you train yourself to hold your emotions like a fortress, no one gets in. No one forgets the one they couldn't enter. You become the mystery, the standard, the unsolved variable in their story. And anyone who encounters a mystery can't stop orbiting around it. This isn't about being cold. It's not about pretending to be stoic to look powerful. This is evolution. You've grown past guilt, begging, needing to be understood, liked, forgiven, or seen. You don't reject emotion. You command it, channel it, and save it for when it's useful. You're no longer a servant to your feelings. You're their architect. If Machiavelli had one rule to leave behind, it wouldn't be don't feel. It would be this: don't let anyone know you feel unless it makes you stronger. Because real power isn't in being unfeeling, it's in being indecipherable. No one can destroy what they can't define, no one can control what they can't read, and no one can manipulate what refuses to flinch. You don't explain your peace, you don't defend your standards, you don't chase closure. You move when you want, speak when it matters, disappear when it's time, return without apology, command without apology. And when they ask, how did you become like this? You say, I stopped letting the world teach me when to feel. I started teaching myself.